To this live webinar around the mid-block, national team strategies and tactics. I'm delighted to welcome Andy Edwards, national coach, onto the call, along with Matt Bishop, a licensed lead. Throughout the webinar, if you can kind of make some observations and some kind of notes in your notepad in preparation for discussions at a later point. And we will be breaking at some point to allow you to gather your thoughts around some of the information what's going to be sharing you this morning. Throughout the meeting, if you want to use the chat function to try and drop any kind of questions you might have for Andy, so we can ask to try and deepen your understanding around the theme, then that'd be great, and we'll get going. So these are the session outcomes. So develop an understanding of England national team's perspective on the mid-block and the associated principles. What did the preparations look like within the 2017 male 20s World Cup, and how the thinking has evolved since the introduction of new systems, and then what's it like within the practice design. So we've just got a short video to show you around the principles of play. Try to cast your mind to the right hand side of the model, so the out of possession principles, and Rambo will shortly put the video on. So great little video to try and allow you to unpack the game of football around the framework of the principles of play model. So we've seen the top teams within different leagues utilising the framework. Now we just want to go to an example of the England teams and what a mid-block maybe looks like for them. And again, just really encourage you to really make some observations and some notes around what you've seen, but also how it can relate to you in your environment with your players. Great. So a little intro to just identify exactly what the mid-block kind of looks like. Morning, Andy. How are you?
Morning, Stu. Very good, thanks.
Now to invite you in to try and talk around kind of who you are, what your kind of role is at the FA, and kind of your experiences, what you've experienced around the mid-block, around the national teams.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stu. Yeah, my background, I come in 2017 and joined the FA. AD Booth already just moved up to 21's manager. Paul Simpson come in as the head coach with the 20s. And myself and Aaron Danks were assistant coaches, if you liked, and we focused on the in and out of possession. So my role was focusing on the out of possession aspect of the game. So we was really lucky to come into the group at a good time. AD had qualified for the World Cup, and we took the players in a camp in March where we went out to France to play France, Senegal, and Portugal. So that was our introduction to the players. And with that, we considered how we should play, what the England DNA was, what the principles were, and AD had laid down some really good foundations with the team. Obviously, it was a good side; they'd qualified, and for us, it was really to continue the good work. My role now has slightly changed. I'm an assistant coach, and this season I'm working. Across the 18s, 19s, and 20s, but predominantly working on camp with the talk about the mid block and what it looked like over the course of the tournament. So these were the principles in 2017, and very little was changed from that day. They may be simplified in terms of the word and terminology now, but this is what it looked like. So high press from restarts, control situations, counter pressing, recover to team shape quickly and with control, make play predictable, and obviously defend with a compact team shape and strong mentality. So I'm trying to touch upon all of those aspects over the course of the next however many minutes we're here for. At that point in time, England teams played as a 4-3-3 system, whether that was with two pivots and a 10, or with a deep line midfielder and two 8s, if you like. So that was our system. We played 4-2-3-1. The mid block strategy around making play predictable, recovering at pace, regaining retained compact shape, and obviously recognising the earliest opportunity to win the ball. So these were the games we played in the World Cup. The first 3 games were group stages: Argentina, Guinea, South Korea, and then Costa Rica, Mexico, Italy in the semi-finals, and Venezuela in the final. So suffice to say, we won the competition, which was fantastic. It wasn't without its challenges along the way. Some really tough games, tough opposition, tough situations, a lot of considerations over the course of the tournament. So I'm just going to look at aspects within the mid-block over the course of 4 games, which was Argentina, South Korea, Mexico, and Venezuela, and talk about the different challenges that we faced along the way. So they're the aspects I'll be focusing on each game. And just in terms of our planning process, so what it looked like then, it's very similar now. Teams are slightly different across the pathway, but from us, from training to match day, obviously we'd review the opposition. So leading into the World Cup, the first 3 games we looked at 5-6 games of Argentina, South Korea, and the other team. It's absolutely gone out of my head, whoever the second game was. So my apologies there.
Korea.
Sorry,
yeah.
Stu, who was it?
Korea.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my apologies. So we'd review the game obviously ourselves. We'd have a game plan, but we also wanted the players to be part of that. So the players would look at clips of the opposition, 10 minutes of clips, 8-10 minutes of clips, and they would feed back to us their thoughts on it. So game planning would look like unit meetings the night before the game, where the defenders and goalkeepers would come in, the midfielders would come in, and the forwards would come in, and all separate meetings, trying to align it to what they'd seen, what we'd seen, and delivering the game plan. So there'd be the what ifs as well. So any questions the players had, they would ask us in those meetings. And obviously we'd play the game and then review the game after. Again, with the players feeding back to us. So this was the first game, Argentina. We'd been out in Korea for 3 days. We had a 7-day camp in Japan, but we hadn't managed to play a warm-up game leading into it. So we felt we were prepared, felt we were ready, and this was the game plan slide in terms of the mid-block. So we wanted to have a front foot mentality. We wanted to get after Argentina. We felt we could affect them. We looked at their previous games in qualifying, and they were very direct, 4-4-2 consistently. So we felt we knew how they were going to play. Then 2 or 3 days before the game, we actually got some YouTube footage of their 2 warm-up games against Vietnam, and it looked like they'd almost completely changed their approach, and they really looked to play a passing game and dominating possession. So that threw us a little bit. So what did we do with our game plan? We thought it was really important that we stuck to what we did best and what the team had done previously in terms of qualifying. So 9 and 10 prevent the pass into the deep line midfielder, false outside, ball size 7-11. So you can read that for yourselves. That was the game plan within that mid block. But like I said, we wanted to make them predictable and really get in their faces, if you like. So what did make play predictable mean? Obviously, identifying the opposition strengths and weaknesses, dictate where and how they play, and a big thing around not through. So we're going to show them outside on every opportunity. This is the game plan slide the slide that sits along that. But unfortunately, the Argentina game, I say unfortunately, we actually won the game 3-0. And it probably flashed Argentina. So you just look at this clip here. We want to have a front foot mentality. We want to be compact. We want to have support behind the press. But we gave them opportunities to play in between. We didn't really support behind the press. There were gaps in our strategy, if you like. And we're looking at it after reflecting. And it was that because of the warm-up games, we didn't have a warm-up game. Like I said, Argentina had 2 games leading into it. Was it the nervousness around the first game of an opening tournament? Was it the fact that it was very hot, which we probably didn't take into consideration? It was a 2 o'clock kickoff mid-afternoon in Korea. So a really tough challenge. So just looking at that picture there, we wanted our 9 and 10 to share the press, but our 7's gone drifting a little bit. We haven't got that support behind the ball from our fullback, so we became a little bit disjointed. So got drawn out positions, and again you see this picture here, gaps around midfield, not really enough pressure on the ball. So again, as a side, we become a little bit disjointed, a little bit disconnected. And again, look at this picture here. So again, we're trying to get pressure on the ball. They dominated possession, the Argentinians. They pushed us into a low block on many occasions. We defended a low block excellently. So our strategy was to affect them high up the pitch. It didn't turn out that way. So again, looking at that mid block, midfield is too narrow. Our 11's tucked in too narrow again, and it just gave them the opportunity to switch play and get on our back line very easily. So a real challenge in that first game. Any questions around that, Stuart Bish?
Yeah, I think there's some great visuals, Andy, aren't there? Even though there's still slides, it really creates a really clear picture. And I suppose, you are a high-pressing team, but you've kind of alluded to the fact that, yeah, you won the game, but actually you probably won the game from a deeper position. So that kind of adaptability within the moments of the game to try and come up with solutions to these game problems are really important. I suppose the question would be how you kind of get that thinking into the player's head throughout the minimal time you have with them. So the kind of the off-field coaching, what you demonstrated on the previous slides, that would be a key part of it, I would have thought.
Yeah, it was a big part of it. So they were part of the review process, part of the planning process, if you like. So we felt we had a real good understanding of how we wanted to play. Like I said, there was a challenge around Argentina, and we'd seen them qualify playing a certain way, and then we see the 2 warm-up games in the week leading up to this game, where they'd almost completely changed their style. So that threw us a bit. So, like I said, it was going back to our principles and how we were going to affect them as much as anything. But it was a real challenge to sort of moving on. Again, as I said, we end up in a low block consistently, but we defended really, really well in the low block. So we've all got strategies how we want to approach a game. We want to press them high. That doesn't always come off. So what does it look like in the mid-block? And mid-block on this day wasn't fantastic, but fortunately our low block we were excellent, and we were very strong on the counter-attack. And we went in at half-time 1-0 up from a goal from Dom Calvert-Lewin that took the pressure off us. And then it was obviously around the messages at half-time. So that the idea was to stick to the game plan, but we need to be more patient. We might have to recognise that we have to allow them possession at times, but make sure we stay connected and then recognise pressing triggers. It was quite an almost mentality of passiveness, if you like, and we didn't really commit to individual moments in the game. So we weren't aggressive in 1v1 situations. We didn't get up to the ball. So that was really the message at half time, to stay calm, but stay connected in terms of distances between our players, recognise those triggers to press, and make sure that when we do press as an individual, be aggressive with it, back yourself, and make sure we get that support behind the ball, which we were certainly better second half. But again, they had quite a lot of possession, the Argentinians, and the picture often looks like that. It's a mid-block, bordering on a low block, but this time we had a lot more compactness about us, better with our distances, more aggressive with our press, and we actually went on to win the game 3-0, which was obviously a great start to the tournament, and confidence sort of was built from there, I guess. So moving on to, this was the third game against Korea. Again, this was the host nation, obviously, and this game we needed a draw. We'd drawn with Guinea in the second game, and then this was the third game where a draw would see us through to the next stage of the tournament. So again, obviously a really important game, but we knew that a win would give us a better pathway. A slightly easier side of the draw, lesser seeded teams in it, and also we'll have earlier kickoff times, which was made quite a difference. We'll have evening kickoffs as opposed to 2 o'clock kickoffs. So a really important game. If we could win it, fantastic. We looked at how they played leading into this game, and they played 4-3-3. They actually changed their system again, so we prepared for 4-3-3, and then they played 3-4-3. Probably the first time I'd come against this system. But just to focus really around this game on recovery and the importance of this in a mid-block. So what does it look like? For us, recovery runs are sprints. That's not negotiable. And then it's around delaying the opposition to win possession back. And for me, the key within this is your personnel. I always think your 7 and 11s, your wide players. Alongside these players, we had Harry Chapman and Ainsley played as a wide player. Ainsley Maitland-Niles played as a wide player. But we were blessed in having four lads or 6 players that really sort of bought into what we wanted to do. But I think whatever system you play, whether it's 3-4-3, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, for me, within a mid-block, these players are key. I often think they're your creative ones, they're your match winners. Sometimes they could be your mavericks, if you like. And they can be, certainly in developmental years, I think a challenge in making them understand the tactical side of the game and the demands that are required from an out of possession perspective. So in terms of what we're looking for in these players, so obviously technically defending 1v1 footwork, which goes for every player, regains and interceptions, but that tactical side, the positioning, the distances, are they aware of pressing triggers, and that ability to screen and deny forward passes. So again, just looking at this, obviously a lot of words on here, and this is I guess a tick list of the perfect defensive player as a 7 or 11. But for me, the bottom one, understanding the role to screen and deny forward passes, is a big part of it. But also that mentality, I think, is a massive part in terms of a willingness to do the job and the discipline, and also the consistency in the recovery. Any thoughts around that, Stu, Bish?
Andy, I was just going to ask you a question. So and we were talking about this the other day, each one of those players is slightly different as well, isn't it? They've got different strengths and bring different things to the team. And also the profile of some of them were in and around or playing first team football as well. So how did you change, obviously, if personnel changed? So if Ojo was playing wide and Dow was playing wide, for example, or Calvert-Lewin in there, was there any subtle changes in terms of how you defended based on the personnel you had?
I think the key to it was the message, Bish, in terms of we were consistent with the message and the expectation of what we wanted from those players, whilst recognising they've got different strengths. Kieran Dow is different to a Shea Ojo, obviously. But I think there was a clear understanding from the players, and this is obviously going back to when Aidan and Lee Carsley were with the group in terms of what their role was within the team. So I think they had a clear understanding, we had a clear expectation of what we wanted from them. And I think that's what they delivered. There are subtle differences in terms of how they press, etc., what their 1v1 defending looks like. But I think tactically, when you look at the games back, it could have been the same player playing in those positions, because I think they were very consistent in terms of their roles. I think the partnerships are important as well, all over the pitch. That aspect of it comes into it as well. But that would be the key message for me is the clarity of the message that we gave them, really.
Yeah, brilliant.
So if you just looking at this picture, obviously we've got good possession against the Corinthia. Our fullbacks on the ball. So this is Adi Lookman, this side that I've just highlighted. So in a great position. So he's thinking, can I get the ball, an opportunity to attack? We're all thinking that, to be honest. But next that, all of a sudden, the picture changes and we've got under threat of losing the ball. So can he read and recognise the threat? What's his reaction to that? We expect him to recover to team shape. When you look away from the ball as well, away from Adi, our two centre-halves, do they press the ball? Do they delay? How do we deny them an opportunity to drive forward? But really, it's that mentality and reaction. And commitment to that recovery. So asking Adi to get himself back into that shape. He's comfortable, being comfortable out of possession. It's getting yourself back into shape and reacting quickly. And Adi was very good the whole time, as all the wide players were, just in terms of that technical detail of leaning across people, using his body. I wish I could show you the actual video of this, but we're not allowed to show the videos. But hopefully it just gives you a little picture of the role of Adi or the wide players within our recovery, but also the expectation from the players around as well. So by this point, within 3 or 4 seconds, we regained our team shape. We've got decent security in there, back behind the ball, and we've won back possession. And there, our thought now is, can we attack? So thinking about our transition and again that security.
So how important is balance for you when you're in possession, then, Andy? So keeping that, in preparation for losing the ball as well. So although you're thinking about in possession, you're also thinking about out possession. How important is that for you in terms of balance? What kind of sort of shape or key principles did you have when in possession? That defensive shape for you.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a massive part of it, Bish. Any time being one of the last pessimists, I'm almost expecting us to lose the ball. What does it look like behind the ball? Are we secure on transition?
Yeah,
that would change slightly in terms of the opposition. So will it be your 2 centre halves and 2 holding midfielders? Would you keep one of your fullbacks back? I think they're the considerations in terms of who you're playing against.
Yeah.
When you're playing maybe lesser nations in qualifiers, their strategy is often a mid to low block. So we can often be a fool to be relatively expansive in those situations, and we might release both fullbacks and have your 2 holding midfielders. So I think it's opposition dependent, but it always has to be in place. Whatever part of the pitch you're on, you're obviously looking to have that security, whether it's a 2 and a 3 in front or 3 and a 2. I think there's slight preferences that coaches might have.
Yeah.
It's also led by your opposition, but also by the attributes of your players. So I think it's recognising what you've got in your team. We have players that can really recover at pace. So does that allow you to be a little bit more adventurous? Possibly. But like I say, it's the the strengths of the opposition are key as well.
Yeah.
It's a really key point, isn't it? So the organisation behind the ball, yeah, it might secure the threat for the opposition breaking on you, but also it allows you to consistently have more attacks. So structurally organised behind will allow you to hopefully win more second ball to get second phase, third phase, and fourth phase attacks. It's very rare that you'll go and score initially off the first attack you have. It's how you structure your team whilst in possession away from it in preparation for maybe the one what comes back out, or the positioning where you can show control and patience and keep possession. Because I'm assuming the physical demands on the wide players when they're in possession and maybe on transition to try and sprint back into position, that would be very high if the turnover was quite a lot. So I suppose it's the in possession and the out of possession really kind of complementing each other to try and give the players the required rest, certainly the heat of the match day, in really kind of physical, demanding tournament football.
Yeah, for sure, Stu. Yeah. I think that's to be considered as well. That, you know, like say the first game it was around 80 degrees heat. We're fortunate in the second game also, and this third game is an evening game. But all those factors have to be considered when working out your strategy of how you're gonna play, how you're gonna defend, how you're gonna attack, etc., and what that looks like with your security behind the ball. I mean, the initial thing is, you know, as soon as we lose it, 5-second regains, can we win it back quickly? You know, but that's without putting the ball in behind or other aspects of the game at risk. So huge consideration. Well, lots of considerations really. So leading on to, this was now, we then played Costa Rica in the last 16, and this was the quarter-final against Mexico. And in Mexico were looking at them and their previous games. They were 4-4-2. Their strengths were in wide areas. They were fantastic in wide areas. A really good side, very attacking, a lot of pace in the side. So it really questioned our approach to what had been the previous 4 games. In terms of showing teams outside, this phrase we use, around not through. So nothing comes through our shape. We try and force teams outside, but this was Mexico's strength in wide areas. So we had good discussions about it. Myself, Paul Simpson, and thanks in giving to the players was really understood, and it was important to keep that simple and keep that clarity. What it did cause was discussions around maybe team selection and personnel and who would best be able to deal with that. So that was our considerations around that game. And the focus on this game is really around compact shape as well. So what does that mean? So squeeze and narrow the pitch. Again, as I mentioned, show wide and defend centrally. So we stuck to that principle. Obviously getting pressure on the ball, deny forward passes, dominating 1v1s. So as the tournament was starting to progress, we're 4 games in now. The understanding was better. The cohesion in the team was better. There was obviously a confidence within the players. And at this point, it really started, I felt, to kick into gear in terms of the understanding of it. With our selection, we had that consideration of obviously who should play. And we take, to be honest, we were quite undecided. Obviously, it was Paul Simpson's decision who to pick, but we thought about training and what that should look like in the days leading up to the game. And some of that and what we see in training obviously based our decision, or based Paul's decision on the actual selection of the side. So that was an important aspect of it. But just again, looking at this picture, a real simple picture. Again, Mexico had a relative amount of possession. So we're just looking here, quite clearly see their 4-4-2 shape. Obviously, the fullback's in possession, and we're looking at our wide play, the line of approach. So we didn't want to show them inside. If anything, I was going to go outside. You can see the 7 up against our fullback. Some real detail around our fullback's body shape, recognising that running behind. Looks like he's trying to run off his shoulder. Maybe he's going to check back in. So the player approaching the ball, we spoke about getting down the line of the ball. He's not coming inside. If anything, he's going outside. But make sure you get down the line of the ball. But the importance of that 1v1 defending, we knew that would be an aspect of it. And there were times when they got our fullbacks in 1v1 situations, but we defended it very well. But also just looking away from the ball there, position of our 2 centre-backs and our fullback and midfield starting to narrow across. So again, when they're trying to engage on the ball, but making sure that passes aren't made into their 2 9s. So our 2 central midfielders, our 4 and 8 about screening, about sliding across, but then also being in a position to recognise when they can press. If they're too deep on the toes, obviously it encourages the midfielder to have it. So that was an important part of it. And again, you can just see that shape there. Ideally, our 9's coming across a little bit earlier, but our 10's negative pressure on the ball. We've got really good shape behind the ball. Ball goes back, and you just see our line adjust. We've moved up a blade of grass, or 6 yards of grass, and leaving the wide right player offside. So again, by this point in the competition, we'd really started to get a real consistency in what we were doing, and some real good detail around it as well. Any thoughts on that, Bish or Stu?
No, I think I know you're going to touch on it a little bit later on, the role of the striker in this as well. So his position at all times, that when you do regain, there was always an out for it. So he's always threatening him behind, isn't he?
Yeah, always an aspect of it. And we spent a lot of this conversation. I wouldn't say the vast majority out of possession, but obviously you're playing good sides, you're going to spend time out of possession. So that transition, which we touched upon earlier, was a massive part of it. Yeah. So we wanted out of possession our 9 to be sharing that press, but also once it's in that mid block and he can't affect it, be in a position that if we win it, can we counter? He's in a position to receive it, and then we get support around it. So yeah, a massive part of it. So by this point, we played Italy in the semi-final, and then we played Venezuela in the final, which I'll just touch upon quickly. But again, maybe a bit of a complicated picture looking at this, but just our general shape, we're recovering to team shape. But highlighted in red here, this is actually our central midfielder ends up in this left-back position. We've actually got Adi Lukman, who's playing wide left as in the number 10 position. So in terms of the personnel, you can argue they're all in the wrong position, but the movement of the opposition obviously drawn us into these areas. But again, going back to it, in terms of our 4-2-3-1 shape, about being compact, what it looked like in a mid-block, it just felt that everybody understood each other's role and what it should look like at any given point in the game. So just a visual really of I guess player understanding. When they're drawn into different positions, what does it look like? Do we still keep our shape? We're still patient out of possession.
I suppose it's making the right decisions in them positions as well, isn't it, Andy? So if you've got maybe a centre midfielder playing as a fullback, he's got to do things which are technically the right thing to do for that fullback player and not take the risk. Because if he takes a risk and it doesn't work, then obviously they're on your goal, aren't they? So it's recognising the tactical elements, but recognising the technical execution at that moment. So the question will be to the coaches listening is how we prepare our players for that. So how do we give them a variety of different experiences in different positions all the way through the player pathway to try and equip them for making them kind of decisions in the moment of the game to adapt to whatever the game presents them with so they can succeed?
Yeah. So that was touching upon 4 games and certain aspects of our mid-block. Obviously, a massive part of us winning the competition. But in terms of summary, I thought the value of the work on and off the pitch. Obviously, they're with us for 5 weeks. The work that had gone on before, obviously, consistency and message with Adi as the head coach. The consistency and simplicity of the message. I think that's really important. You've got players coming from different clubs and different ways of playing. So it's important there's a clear understanding of what we expect of them from an England perspective. So understanding the principles, recognising the profile and the attributes of the players we've got, a really important part of it. And quite simplistically, having really good players really helps, whatever your strategy, whatever your tactics. And we're blessed that we're able to select from all the clubs in the country, and we can almost pick the best of the players. So that makes a big difference to us. The consideration is looking at this. We looked at after forcing wide. Does that compromise area transition? If we get them inside, will we be in better positions to attack the opposition? So that's a consideration. And obviously, we were consistent with this system over the course of the tournament, 4-2-3-1. What does that look like with a different system? So they were our sort of considerations, or our summary considerations at the end of the tournament.
No, fantastic, Andy. It's a fantastic insight into some of the thought process and some of the real kind of clear detail what you're providing the players. What I suggest maybe now to the coaches on the webinar is just to take maybe the length of the next music track So about 2.5 minutes just to capture your thoughts, anything what he's got you thinking about in preparation for the workshop this afternoon. But also any questions what you might want to pose to Andy around some of his thinking and work so far. And then after this, about 2.5 minutes, we'll then progress on to the next part of the meeting around what it looks like on the pitch. Thanks, Rambo, for that choice of music. Yeah, hopefully everyone's captured the thoughts and made some notes. Really appreciate a couple of messages coming through now on the chat, so please keep them coming through. Just allows it to be a bit more interactive, the presentations we go through. Andy, I don't know if you can see the kind of chat with the messages coming through. Do you maybe want to highlight one, or do you want me to kind of read one out?
I can't see them, Stu. You have to, okay, yeah, if you can read one out.
So thanks, Peter, for sending one through. So it's, hi, Andy. When facing opposition who managed to get success like Argentina, what would you say the key points would be to reduce their ability to get the balls wide?
To reduce the abilities to get the ball wide?
What would you do?
Well, in terms of we accepted that the ball would go wide at times. You know, that was our trigger point. Certainly in the high press, the ball going wide was a trigger to us for our 7-11 to press. So we was actually okay with that in that situation. And the same in the mid block, really. Ideally, you're attacking down the line of the ball and you've got an opportunity to force an error and regain for a misguided pass. But I think it's identifying the triggers in which you want to press. Like I say, for us, that was in wide areas. Once it gets into that final third of the pitch, and yeah, the ball's gone wide. What does it look like inside the pitch? There's a risk of a cross coming in. What's your 1v1 defending look like? What's the cover and balance around that look like? So I think all those aspects are really important. But when the opposition's got the ball, obviously you're trying to win it back, but there are I guess trade-offs. What we were really strong on was teams overloading centrally, which is obviously a common theme of many teams. And making sure we didn't get overloaded and exposed in central areas where we thought teams were a bigger threat to us.
Brilliant. And, thanks again for sending the questions through. We'll just take one more. So Cranes, from you. In the mid-block, can you explain how you coach recovery lines on the off-field? This is something we have an issue with. Have you got any activities or player-led ideas to support this?
Can you just repeat that, Stu, please? Are you what, sorry?
So in the mid-block, can you explain how you coach recovery lines on and off the field? This is something we find issues with at the club.
Yeah. I suppose, obviously that comes down to I guess, session design. I think the first thing is to make sure players have obviously got an understanding of that. Obviously that's delivered on the training pitch, off the training pitch, but I think getting across the importance of it. I'm just talking about, not just talking about wide players, talking about central midfielders, fullbacks, etc. As Bish mentioned earlier, what does your security behind the ball look like initially? So can you buy yourself time? Can you deny and delay teams? That's a massive part of it, that you don't leave yourself too overloaded. But for me, it's then around that mentality to recover. Obviously, recognising where to recover to. That would be my initial thoughts on it. Bish, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
No, I think you're right in terms of practice design. If you don't, and one of the big things that we've talked about throughout the course so far is that quite often when you do a defending practice, teams or you've already got your team in shape. So how often do we start out with the ball and then we work from transition? So it's then working on those recovery runs. So you're actually creating those opportunities to work on that. And I think that's a really important part in terms of when we're thinking about practice and linking to how we play and some of the problems that you're going to solve. So if you're going to have a lot of possession of the ball, you've also got to be thinking about, well, what happens when we lose it? And how do I include that within practice? So certainly for me, when we're doing defending practices, how many of you actually start with the ball and then work from that transition would be a real key area for me on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Bishop. And you're going to get it within every training session as well. I think whatever you set up in training, whatever you do, there's going to be aspects of needing to recover. Yeah. So I think it comes out in every session. But if you can design it around, the points that Bish made, obviously it adds to that. I think
Andy, I think linking to what you said earlier on as well, I think you were quite clear that everyone understood their roles and responsibilities as well. So it's getting that clarity again about what their job is in the team, in these different circumstances. So having that real clarity. So not only are we talking about position specific, but we're also starting to, have a clarity around their roles and responsibility, both in and out possession is probably a really important one as well.
Yeah. And the expectation you've got of your players, as an example, centre half gets pulled out down the channel. Yeah. Is it your fullback you want to recover inside? Is it a midfielder you want to recover? Yeah. So it's all of those things. It's what you want from your players as well, because we all want different things.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andy.
So just moving on. So since the World Cup, obviously a lot of water's gone under the bridge. So 17-18 season, we had Euro qualification, playing a 4-2-3-1, and then we went to the tournament in Finland. And I think it was over 30 players we had unavailable to us. So we took a different squad with different attributes, and we actually went with 3-5-2. We got eliminated, unfortunately, from the finals. So that was a negative experience following on from qualification and World Cup success. So that was a real challenge and a bit of a learning curve in many respects. And then 18-19, new group of players. And then this season, we're taking part, COVID allowing, in the under-19 qualifiers, and with Ian Foster I'm working with now, who plays a 4-2-3-1 system. But in terms of that challenge with a new system and a new group of players, it's the considerations really. So I guess as well as what I've got there, what do they play at their club? What are they used to? What's the previous system they've played when that new group comes into us as coaches? What suits them? What are their strengths? It's important we're in development, so that we're creating a pathway for high potential. So yes, it's about winning games. We're all competitive, I think, at any level, but it's also developing players for the senior team. Then developing your strategy. What is the strategy and why? And then obviously in that mid block again, who, how, and when do we press from that mid block. So what does that look like? So they're the different challenges. And going into that 4-3-3 when we moved on from the World Cup group, and then the following year we played 4-2-3-1. We then went 4-3-3, and between us as coaches, we had a lot of conversations around what that should look like, who we should press with. So quite simplistically, we would sit around the Subbuteo table and have different conversations around it. So should we press in this situation, looking at this picture here? Is it the 9 that presses? Is it the 7 that presses? Is it 7, 9, 11? Should it be our 10 that's jumping out? Should it be our 8 that's jumping out to affect that? What does that look like behind the ball? So we had lots of conversations around that, and what that should look like. Stu, I'm going to ask your thoughts on it before I tell you how it ended up for us. What it looked like.
I suppose a big depends comes in, doesn't it? So it's finding a way of defending which suits the personnel you've got at your disposal. I suppose whether it is a 9, 7, 11 or the 10 and 8 jumping out of the positions, I suppose it will come down to capability and maybe how you want to maybe exploit the opposition on the transition. So you might show them into dead ends in central areas because you might be able to go and exploit a weakness what you've seen from the opposition. So I suppose it depends, and it's just being really clear about what you want the players to do and how you kind of get that message across to them, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, of course, opposition dependent as well. We've subtly changed things, but fundamentally, we went with pressing with our 9 at our 7 and 11, if you like. There's an argument. I think Chelsea were doing it very well at the time with Sarri in terms of pressing with your 10 and 8 and keeping your wide players in, keeping them compact. But then there was that conversation around on transition. Where do you want your most attacking players? Your 7, 11, do you want them higher up the pitch? i.e. maybe like Liverpool are a little bit, or do you want them that little bit deeper? So we had conversations around that, which I come second in, which wasn't a problem. Paul Simpson, we wanted to go a certain way, and as a coach, yeah, no problem, great, let's do that. So we had some real good conversations around that. And then what's the position in your 4? Should he be deeper? Should he be screening the back 4? Who's he screening? Are they playing 2 in there? Are they playing 1? Should he flatten off, which allows your 8 and 10 to get out to fullbacks, etc. So there was lots of debate, lots of conversation. I'm sure everyone will have different ideas and different ways of doing things. So Matt, if you can just play this slide. So it's probably a little bit of a compromise, if I'm honest. So that should play. So again, it was about staying connected, about a back 4, but having an aggressive line, recognising the threat on the ball, the threat in behind. So we looked at that. If you're playing against a 4-3-3, there's our +1 in the back line. We're man for man. If you like, 3v3 in the middle, and their overload comes from their back 4, building their attack or creating their attack in that middle third. So again, we spoke about our 9 looking to press, and the compromise maybe come with our 7 narrowing off, and we kept with that around not through principle. And again, that trigger to press. Ball goes wide, nothing for our shape. That's our chance to go and press. Again, I'm not sure what's happened with that slide. We'll just play it from there. And again, we just spoke about the opposite wide man, being in a really aggressive position to press if they switch the play. And also, you can go on from that. If they do play outside, what does that look like? Is that our 8 and 10 sliding across? Is it the 3 jumping? We spoke about the threat of the opposition pivot. Should that be our 4? But we identified much for our personnel, really the strengths of our personnel, that it would be the side of our midfield central shape that would press their pivot. And again, that license to go and jump onto the centre back as well. So that was how we approached that in terms of that shape. And like I said, there'll be subtle changes depending on who we would play against. So that's something you might want to consider in your clubs, whoever you're working with, whether you're working with first teams, development teams, younger age groups, is recognising these points here. Bish, anything on that? Or Stu, if you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, I think we were talking again. Yeah, I just think this is a great start for you guys, and you might add to this list, but this is obviously something that you've discussed when you're with squads and obviously with the staff, kind of this the framework and considerations you put into when particularly in the mid-block phase. So what does it look like in your context, as you said there, and obviously you building your own?
Yeah, I think the considerations for me around what would you do at your club and why. Suppose we made reference before, Andy, around the +1 security at the back. Now, if I'm working in development with the younger players, I might not want +1 security. I might want to leave them isolated 1v1 to develop that individual around defending excellence. So it's just being really clear about what it is you want to try and develop and think about ways of trying to put your players in them kind of experiences, really, isn't it? But when you get to performance where it's maybe more focused on the winning side, there needs to be really clear about how you structure your team so you can be successful both with the ball and certainly without it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Stu. It depends what you're working with. If it's just about results, what's going to best get you the result? If you're going to development, you obviously try and develop your players. And like you say, should you isolate players 1v1 to give them that challenge and really push them? I think that's
I suppose you've got, Andy, at national team is that you're looking, like you say, to try and develop players for the senior team, but you get better and more competitive games when you win games and get through to more tournaments as well, don't you? So it's kind of balancing that kind of focus, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah,
completely that balance. Yeah, you want to give them the tournament experience, so you need to win games. Yeah, and at the same time, you try and develop individuals. So a real difficult one. Yeah, and part of this system when we went 4-3-3, it was around our best, arguably our A-grade players. So we wanted to make sure the best players are in the team, and we felt this was probably the system that suited them. Go on, Bish.
Yeah, I suppose the other question then about the opposition, so the different shapes and the opposition throw at you as well, and how that sort of the different problems that might give you in terms of when you're playing in your 4-2-3-1. So how you might have to do it subtly different based on the problems that the opposition throw you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you've certainly got to be adaptable in it. We played Italy and they were 4-3-3, very traditional. We dominated the first half, and second half they changed. They changed to I think they went 3-5-2 second half. So different challenges that gives us within that. You got the players maybe looking over, asking questions, give them clarity in terms of the expectation, or you're asking your players to make decisions within those questions that are asked.
Right.
So this was we played Germany in a friendly, and again going back to game planning. Like I said, we like the players to be part of that as much as possible. But it was really difficult in this game because Germany had played 3 different systems in the games leading up to it. So we had an idea of what it looked like in terms of them building the attack, creating the attack. So what it would look like in that mid block, centre halves that carried the ball, fullbacks that provided the width, centre midfielders look to receive inside the pitch. Often playing with a pivot, but difficult again to work out the opposition. So again, it comes back to how we're going to play. This game's played at Colchester, and again, the game plan, as I showed you there on the animation slide, was around 41 way. Again, nothing for our shape, and they were the big messages there really. But the first half, again, we spent a lot of time out of possession. I'll just show you this little video, but I think it's about being comfortable out of possession. This is almost being compact, but being patient, being passive to an extent, and waiting for the opportunity to press. But again, they caused us a lot of problems in the first period. Wide player coming inside, the left-hand side, fullbacks pushing on, and we got a little bit caught in between. But again, we weathered the storm. Was very good in a low block and good in aspects and moments in the mid block. And managed to go in at half time, 0-0. So again, we said about that ball side player being narrow. We allow them to have it outside. Can we press? And then now 11 in a position to jump. So if it goes to that centre half, we press on that. But they're very patient, Germany, in their build up, very controlled. So again, like I said, a lot of time spent out of possession, which was a real challenge for us, but well executed by the players. Again, this is my animation, so it's not as fancy as some of the stuff you've seen, but that principle around, not through, recognising triggers to press, and obviously then transition. What does it look like on transition? So if you can play that video for us, Matt. And again, it's not painted, I don't think, these clips. But I think what you can see is a more front foot mentality than you saw previously. So it's still mid-block, recovering to team shape. I just think when you look at these pitches moving, everyone's reacting to it. So yeah, there's pressure on the ball. What does it look like behind the ball? Who's affecting the pivot? Are we ready to jump onto the centre back? Is there pressure on the ball? So I think it's really looking away from the ball in this situation that is the most pleasing from a defensive point of view. And again, they're in that position to attack. And again, still looking at that security behind the ball. If it breaks down now, we're in a good position to regain again. And again, this one, as we spoke about, out of shape. So we haven't got good balance at the moment. Asking our wide players to recover. We're still the ball, and again, we're in a great position to go and attack. So I think when you look at that as a mid-block, we can argue it wins you the game in terms of those principles. So again, going back to what we spoke about earlier, that recovery from our wide players' expectation, and then the importance of that transition, which is obviously a huge part of it. So just challenges of working on camp and considerations for practice design, which I'll go on to. Bish, Stuart, anything on the Germany clips or any points you want to make?
Yeah, no, it's a couple of points really. So the bit around the coach pain, it's a really kind of good skill to have, isn't it? As a coach, being able to kind of clip and demonstrate what your thinking is around a visual. And like you say, it just needs to be just that, isn't it? Where you've got a simple representation of what the key points you want to kind of engage the players in, which identifies exactly what that block might look like. And I think it's a skill set on the off-field coaching that us as coaches need to be really mindful of, because this is what the top coaches are doing now, clipping their own clips, painting it, or getting these kind of visual representations on the clips to try and engage players both on and off the pitch. That's certainly for one. But around the clips in general, Andy, it was really good to see how the players kind of adapted to the ever-changing movement of the ball and the opposition players, because that's them making decisions in the moment around the here and now. And I suppose the question would be to the coaches how we develop that through our coaching experiences back in clubs. So how do we get players to come up with these independent decisions in any kind of moment of the game, reacting to what's in front of them, and how do they then provide them solutions to win the ball back, to then go and exploit the opposition where they're weak. So the bit where they transition into the wide space is because both fullbacks are pushed on. That's a real kind of high level skills. How do we kind of design practice to allow the players to experience that more often? Yeah,
I think the point you make there, Stu, about your animations, mine are really basic. I couldn't turn a computer on 3-4 years ago, but the ability to sit down with players, and I think most coaches have got it. Certainly, young coaches a lot of them have got that side to it. But I think it's a really important one as well, to be able to sit down with the player and show them the clips that you've put together as opposed to the analyst, and to go through certain things, because so much of the coaching and the learning happens off the pitch now.
I suppose as younger coaches coming through, that'll certainly help them in understanding the game of football more, won't it? Because they're looking at loads of game footage and actually highlighting the bits what they really kind of value, which are going to help the individual players or units or teams. So it helps both ways, helps in technology, but also helps game understanding. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So just moving on, just in terms of planning sessions and planning camps, we often, if it's a tournament, okay, it could be 4 or 5 weeks, but camps are generally based, international camps are over 10 days, and we might have three games. So we might meet up on a Sunday, game Tuesday, game Saturday, game Tuesday, and then the players depart on the Tuesday night or the Wednesday. So time is really of the essence, and the planning is really important. So the first day of training since player meetup, the players meet up on a Sunday. Up to 23 players from a number of different clubs. So it's important to realign players with our principles of play. It could be match day -2. Could have a game on a Wednesday. So what does training look like? Which can be a real a real challenge around that. The usual problems that everyone faces, numbers alter up to the morning of the session through knocks or niggles. We might have had players that have played on the Sunday and need to rest on the first day. We might have had players that have flown in on the Monday. So it's really difficult in terms of, it can be difficult in terms of training and what that looks like. And just that last point. So again, it's really important to get players along with our principles of play. They've come from many clubs with different ways of playing. But that pre-training meeting, highlighting sessions and outcomes, what we're going after in that session is a massive part of it. So just as an example, great, we've got all of our players available. We're looking at working a mid-block strategy against Germany or France or Italy, whoever that might be against. So really simplistic practice. And I've worked with Paul Simpson, where we've worked in and out of possession on the same day. I've worked with Simo and other coaches where it might be an in-possession day and an out-of-possession day. So I think it's really important to be clear what you're going after and how you're going to go about that. So based on having all your players available, what would a mid-block session look like? Well, for me, it looked quite simplistic like this. If you just play that clip for us, Matt. So again, a simple practice, just working with the team in black. And it's just around that pressure on the ball. So if they win it back, the blacks, they play into the target, player will run it over the line. The blues are building, creating lots of switches of play, which we thought would be common in this game. I think it was the Italy game, the Italy game. Again, I just think you get your messages best across when you have got your full complement of players. So we need to make it challenging for the players. We want it to be enjoyable, but we also want it to be game related, which is generally the challenge in and around international tournaments, which can be the most difficult thing. So again, forcing outside, making sure we've got pressure on the opposition pivot. Hard to probably see the pictures there because it's not painted. But again, just a session that would outline what we're going after. So blocking inside passes, again, trigger to press, and then those regains. You can just flick it on from there, Matt. Okay, so this would be a session if complement of players. So ideally, you've got your 20 outfield players, you've got your goalkeepers, and you can really get into some real detail in terms of how you set up. So this session here, for instance, this is it's a Keith Downey session. It was the under-20s and under-19s coach previously, a real top coach, and most of us have pinched this session off him. From an out of possession perspective, 16 players. So what do we want to do? So part one of it is around overloading or challenging your centre halves, if you like, or your back four. On this particular day, we didn't have a back four, so we had 6 defenders. We had 2 centre halves and a fullback in each team. We put a 9 and a 10 up against them, and you're considering the players and what positions they play. So does that fit your training session? The players on the outside in green at the moment, we had 4 central midfielders and I think 2 wide players in that setup. So you're trying to make that realistic. So this session would be simplicity. The goalkeeper would play out. It'd be a wave practice. Keeper plays out to the wide players. If they're wide players, they receive it wide. If they're central midfield players, they receive it just inside the pitch. And it'd just be a 4v3 overload. So you really, the initial part of it is to work on your 5 and 6, recognising the threat behind, pressure on the ball, adjusting the line. And fullbacks just around balance and cover, 1v1 defending and showing outside. So probably hard to see clearly exactly what's going on here, if Matt plays the video here. So keeper plays out, and it's just a simple 4v3 overload. So I think that first session as well is getting the players, getting that mentality right, challenging them, but also the players in possession, the attacking players, giving them something so they're going to enjoy it and giving them that challenge. So that session is just simply built up. So that'd probably be a 4-minute block, 4 to 6 minute block. And then the second part of it would be with the 4 midfielders coming off the outside from the greens, and obviously work within their teams. So you're now working on the 4 and 8. So as the keeper plays out now, he plays out to into the back line, which might be a back 4. In this case, it's a back 3. The 9 and 10 are passive, play into midfield, and then again it goes live. So you're reiterating the messages to your back line, and then your 4 and 8, which is about screening, sliding, pressing, and that cover and balance. So again, you might see that on this picture here, on this visual here. So again, still an overload. So both teams working. The greens are still neutrals, playing for both teams, whatever team's in possession. It's about getting pressure up to the ball, the balance of the second midfielder, the back line still adjusting and assessing that threat in behind. So it's just trying to build the session. Again, not telling anyone how to coach, but this is a typical session that we would do on one of our camps. And the next part of it is to now introduce the 9 and 10. So as it plays out now, the 9 and 10 are active. Talk about sharing the press, around not through, the 10 dropping in around the pivot, the 9 forcing outside, and those jobs changing if there's a switch of play. So it's just focusing on that aspect now. So now you've got 3 units working. So the focus is now 9 and 10, but you've done the work with the 4 and 8. You've worked with your back line around adjusting, assessing the threat in behind, and just the 2 greens now are the two wide players that play in the opposition half as soon as the defending team receive the ball. So again, just looking at that balance of the team. So we're trying to get those messages across of what it will look like in an 11v11. So it's really around principles.
Andy, can I just ask a question there? There's a question come from the group there about working with the offensive side of it as well. So you've got Steve Mark Robson there as well. So what's sort of like, because you're working in packs there, aren't you? You can see you as coaching staff. You know, there's 3 or 4 of your staff are working, so you're principally running the session. What are the other staff doing? How does that usually work? So if you if the focus is out possession, how are you still working on the in possession stuff? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean the in possession stuff is around the design of the practice, which I'll sit down with Mark Robson and Aaron Danks previously, and then would sit down with Simo. This is what we're delivering. What do you think? So we'd back that around and challenge each other around that. Really important that the attacking side of it challenges the defensive side. So it's important that that's driven. Also, that it's related to how we play. Important. So yeah, Robbo here would be cajoling and making sure the attacking side of it is done correctly. Sometimes he'd be managing the opposition. So I think it's really important, and we've done that well. I think the dynamic of your coaching group is massively important. So you're getting the best out of your session. So we'd always be working as a group and affecting whether it's the in possession and out of possession side of it, whether it's affecting the opposition. So yeah, I think it's always finding a way, Bishop, of getting the best out of everyone rather than stand on the side and have a break.
Yeah, maximising the time you have with the players.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So a real sort of simple practice. And then the next part of it is the 2 green players, the 2 neutrals that were working for both teams as attacking players, and your number 10s and the players we had in there were quite fluid in terms of their positions, offensive players. And then we set the team up. We had a back 3, right? Although we're playing a 4, it's still around the principles. We narrowed off the pitch, etc. Working on our 4 and 8, the message I just said, and there you're working on your 2 wide players in terms of around, not through, getting pressure on the ball, triggers to press, etc. So again, you've lost your 10 now, but you're asking your 9 just to force one way. 4 and 8 get pressure on the ball. Your 7 and 11 is nice and compact, nice and narrow. And again, those triggers to press. And again, looking at that back line, being nice and aggressive, adjusting to the ball and opposition movement. So a real simple session that I think fits in with the principles, but also around the players and every unit within it. Like I say, courtesy of Keith Down in that one, but it's a session a lot of the coaches use, and we've all got our own sessions, our own favourite sessions. Most of them have been pinched off someone else, but I think that's a particularly effective session when you're on camp and your numbers aren't exactly as you would like them. And just finally, really, Bisham, Stu, we've spoke about it, and just that mid-block to transition. And I'm working with the 19s this year, and Ian Foster's the head coach, and it's interesting. He's got slight different ways of doing things in the mid-block and the high press. A little bit more front foot, but there's a real good player understanding of the expectation of what he wants. And ultimately, the mid-block, what you're doing it for? Well, you're doing it to win the ball back. And then what does it look like on transition? So it's just 3 or 4 good examples here of this is the under-19 team in a recent camp. Like I say, it's a result of what a good mid-block looks like. You regain possession, and then you're obviously on the attack and creating chances and scoring. But again, also looking at this with that security behind the ball in mind as well. So again, as soon as you win it, what's your first pass? Are they in good positions to receive? Support around the ball. Numbers in the box, and then obviously that security behind the ball as well. If it does break down, are we in a good position to regain it? So again, triggers a press, really aggressive in terms of the press. Not enforcing him one way, can't switch it there, can't go back to the keeper. So really good shape centrally now. Back lines in around the halfway line, but recognising the threat behind, and then we win it, and then again, real top finishing from what is a good group of players. I think this is the last one. It's going to speak about our wide players, that position. Just affecting that ball out wide now. Fullback can have it, the right back can have it, but the wide player's not. So nothing for our shape. And it's a great opportunity to jump on it and regain possession. So I thought, yeah, just in summary, to finish off with some goals and recognise obviously what the mid block's about. Like I said, we'll do it different ways, different challenges. For us, it's important that the principles are really clear and the players have got a good understanding of it, and the rewards at the end are what you just see there. If it's done correctly.
Fantastic, Andy. We have got a question in the wings at the moment waiting. What I just encourage the coach on the call to do is, while we ask this question, is there any questions to maybe ask Andy around the practice design? Start to populate the chat box. But the question comes from Mick Matthews around how or do you reference the channels as guidelines, Andy? Do you think they have an impact for players' understanding?
Yeah, I think they're referenced in 5 lanes. And if I'm honest, different coaches see different value in them. I think there is a value in it, for sure. I know it's something Aaron Danks would use religiously. Like I say, other coaches don't necessarily use them. I think as a coach, you have to decide if that works for you. And again, that consistency of message with your players. Obviously, you can see it there, but I think it does give the players a reference point. But when it comes down to the game day, they're not there, obviously. So I think that's a good question from Mick. I think there's a little debate around that. It'd be interesting on Mick's views on it. But I think it can work, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on it, Stu?
Yeah, no, I think I've seen many different types of coaches use it, and to the benefit of the whole group, or sometimes just to benefit of the individual player. So everyone's different, aren't they? And how to try and make it a really individualized program, you've got to take these things into consideration. So what might not work possibly for the masses might be really beneficial for that individual player who you want to try and help, support, and scaffold the kind of learning. So again, like with everything what you've kind of talked around today, Andy, it's been really clear. There's been a purpose around doing it. There's a purpose and clarity around the message you want to try and help the players with. How do we then put these kind of learning experiences on both on and off the pitch to try and help the players understand in a very short period of time how to go and succeed, I suppose, isn't it? And utilising everything at your disposal to manage that and help that, I suppose that's the key question, isn't it? And it's always going back to the questions we keep asking on course. You know, what does it mean to you as an individual coach, working in your context with your players and the individuals you've got at hand? So that's the questions we always want to pose. And, you know, even through the chat today, Andy, you've been posing yourself different questions as you've been speaking, and so that just shows the level of thinking you go into as a national coach, and that's something we all need to be encouraged to do, to try and really think about the game deeper, to try and really open our minds up to see how we can best evolve and help the players.
Yeah, definitely.
Questions coming through at the moment, so hopefully we'll get a few. But I just want to say, a big thank you, Andy, for all the hard work you've put in preparation for recording. So there's a lot of hours what go into pulling a presentation of this quality together, and the way you've kind of been really open and honest in how you present it. So a big thank you from myself and Bish, Andy, for the time this morning and sharing your insights around your journey with the national teams.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, Stu. Cheers, Bish.
Well done, Andy. Great work.